So she's a true expert at helping organizations not just hear their employees, but really make a difference with the feedback that they collect from their employees, through their workforce. For over 2 decades, Shawn's been turning insights and working with leaders in HR and L&D and helping them turn insights into real measurable change to help make impact. As General Manager of Enterprise Solutions Business Unit at Explorance, and she leads our thought leadership, she leads a high-impact team that's all about blending strategy, technology, and heart. She's bringing AI and human insight together to shape the future of employee experience, and she's known for her calming energy and thoughtful insights. When she's not out transforming the workplace, you might find her hiking or cheering on her daughter's volleyball games. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Shawn Overcast.
Thank you. Thank you. It's very nice. Okay, no pressure. Calming energy, I'll try to bring it. Well, we're here in the last keynote of our time together. There's been some great energy here this week. I don't know if you all have felt it, but when I run into people in the elevator or the escalator or in the break times, the energy's been terrific. So thank you to all of you for bringing that. I don't know if you've caught on, but this week there's this little thing going on called the Canadian Grand Prix. So I'm going to ask you to bear with me. My job in a closing keynote is to summarize everything that we've talked about, to make some things memorable, make them stick so that you've got some ideas to carry forward, and to be inspirational. And the best way I know how to do that is through a metaphor and through visualizing so that we can remember those last moments. So my topic today is steering towards sustainable change in education and workplaces. And I borrowed the metaphor of racing, in part because it kind of went with the agenda, but also because as I was doing the research, there are actually a lot of parallels between racing and listening. And so I'm going to bring some of those to you today and ask that you try to visualize perhaps maybe the videos that we saw this morning in Mark Priestley's presentation, where we saw the speed of that pit crew and the coordination of the pit crew and the way that they were able to incrementally improve performance over time. And we'll bring some of that to this conversation today. I'm also going to give you a chance to engage with each other a little bit. So this will be somewhat interactive, and we'll have some conversation with each other, perhaps the last conversation before you make your way out the door. But I want to start with a really simple question. Our theme this week was amplifying voices. And I'd like to begin thinking about what does it take to truly amplify the voices in our organizations and in our higher ed institutions. And I'm not talking about just sending surveys or generating reports, but to actually enable expression, to respond to the needs of those that we are serving or supporting, and to create sustainable change. What does it take to amplify voices to really create transformation and sustainable change? Today we're going to talk about what it takes to do that and why listening is a lot like racing. So we take a look here at the high-stakes racing ecosystem. There's a lot of different stakeholders. It's a highly coordinated operational team. And this is what a great feedback system looks like. Just as a racing team thrives on seamless coordination between the pit crew, the driver, the manager that's speaking in the earpiece, a feedback system must align all stakeholders across the organization. And those stakeholders might look something like this. We've got leaders, we have support functions, we have analysts, sponsors of the initiatives that we do. Certainly we have culture, we have the employees, we have the AI tools that we've been learning about and working with over the recent past. And I would argue that we are operating in a high-stakes environment. And a feedback system needs to be as highly coordinated as that pit crew. The leaders, they're our drivers. They're making decisions in real time. The HR team, IT, L&D, you're the pit crew. You're the ones ensuring performance, reliability, and safety. The race engineers and the strategists, those are our analysts and our data professionals. They are monitoring feedback continually. They're planning when to pivot. And culture, well, culture's the track. When the conditions are always changing, it affects our traction and our speed, and we need to pay attention to what the culture is doing as we employ these feedback systems. Without the ability to coordinate, feedback doesn't get used. It just spins in a circle. And so as we look at creating sustainable change, we want to look at how do we align all of these stakeholders. So let's be blunt. You can't win a race with a broken radio. People want to be heard. And if leaders are not listening, they're driving blind. They're not able to make those decisions. And when people feel heard, when they're able to express themselves, they're willing to commit, they're willing to contribute to the work that we need, they're willing to co-create with us to make for a better environment, to improve performance. And this is what drives student and staff engagement. This is what leads to retention. So a lot of the conversations this week have been really focused on what is it that matters most and how do we tune in to what matters most. And drivers, they're relying on this continuous input from spotters so that they can adjust, they can anticipate, they can avoid risk around the corner. A driver doesn't want to make a plan during the race. A driver needs to plan ahead of time. We must do the same thing. We need to understand where we need to tune in. Where are those voices that matter? How can we best get them or enable them to express what matters most to them? And then how can we use that information to make informed, adaptive decisions as the culture, the track, conditions continue to change? We don't invent our listening strategy on the fly. We design it. We intentionally design it with structure, with multiple channels, and with a plan, an intense plan, to close the loop. And when we don't, the signals get missed. The disconnection, the engagement, the retention starts to fail, a disconnection starts to grow. And feedback is the team's fastest fix. Feedback is our quickest way there. Guesswork, intuition, when our drivers are making decisions just based on gut feel, that's when we stall. That's when mistakes happen. When feedback can be acted on real time, it keeps the performance on track. So let's talk about closing the loop. This is where the action happens. Closing the loop, it's not a nice to have. It's the difference between improvement and inertia. Closing the loop helps to ensure that we're not blowing out the same candle year after year after year. We get the feedback, we run the survey again next year, just because we should or because we have to as a check-the-box exercise, and the next year we get the same feedback. When we close the loop, we stop that cycle. And then we had a couple great examples of that presented this week that perhaps some of you were able to get to, and I just want to recognize some of the organizations that are doing this really well. The University of Toronto presented on their effort to redesign their reports to empower their instructors to really derive actionable insights. So for them, it started with the reporting. How do we get the reports to be consumable in a way that drives action? Source America shared with us their multi-touchpoint listening strategy within their organization. They don't just do a once-a-year engagement survey, but they have multiple touch points and pulse surveys and follow-up surveys where they hold themselves accountable to their feedback, to taking action on their feedback, and by doing so, they drive inclusion and engagement across their organization. Regeneron is another where they cut the survey clutter. They really found a way to tune into what matters most by only asking questions that mattered of the right people at the right time. And by doing so, they got sharper insights. Each of these organizations found a way to turn feedback into a performance advantage. So what is it that really drives response rates? In order to drive retention, we need people to keep speaking up. So how do we encourage them to keep speaking up so that we can drive sustainable change? And we've done some research. We're in the middle of this research, actually, and I'll talk a little bit more about that here in a few minutes. But we've got a VOE, Voice of Employee Research study that is ongoing, and I have some preliminary results to share with you today. And what we found is that there are 4 key behaviors that drive participation rate in our feedback efforts. So some of us think about that as response rate, but essentially participation. Are they willing to engage? Are they willing to express themselves through the different channels of feedback that we offer? And there are 4 behaviors specifically that make up over half, that account for over half of the difference in feedback participation. And I'll go through those briefly, and then I've got the spoiler alert up here of what the key driver is for participation rates. One is monthly updates. Are we giving our staff monthly updates about how things are progressing based on the feedback that they shared? Are we giving them updates on what it is we're doing about it? The next is, do employees have an opportunity to share feedback through multiple channels throughout a year? They're not interested in just one survey. In fact, their experience doesn't happen just one time a year. So they're looking for these multiple channels, multiple opportunities to provide feedback. Another is to have clear steps to keep feedback efforts going. So this is the sustainable part, to keep feedback efforts going during times of organizational change or transition. And I don't know about you, but the times of organizational change and transition is like all the time, right? So is anybody experiencing maybe some change or transition in your organization? Yeah. So how do we keep the feedback efforts going? We can't afford to put it on the back burner while we wait for that change to stop. And the last is that leaders are showing they're listening by asking for feedback, by recognizing that the expression has been offered, and by taking action. And in fact, this is the leading driver for what encourages participation in our feedback initiatives. If leaders are engaged, the entire system thrives. And it's not just leadership support. In my experience, what I find is sometimes we say, oh, we have an executive sponsor. Perhaps the leader of the division shows up for the debrief meeting. Perhaps they're willing to support, say, purchase of a technology to support a survey. But it's more than support. It's modeling. It's seeing it all the way through. It's talking about it. It's sharing that the way that feedback has shaped decisions in the organization. Leaders have a role in all of the different success factors for what encourages people to participate, to speak up, to give us those insights. And we can see some of those success factors here. Trust and psychological safety, clear communication of purpose, visible action on feedback, and recognition and appreciation for the time and courage that people share in sharing their feedback. Participation is critical. We need people speaking up, but we want to be able to spot the signals in our environment before the spark. If we run a survey and we wait for the analysis, the spark's already been lit. We want to understand the signals from our students and from our employees before something breaks, before there is the smoke. Smart teams are continually finding ways to listen for the signal. If we imagine the race car driver who's only getting feedback before or after the race, there's no communication during the experience, we could imagine quite a disaster, or perhaps not the winning McLaren team. Race telemetry tells the team when to brake, when the tires are degrading. It flags early signs of when things are overheating or things are about to go south. It tells us to go into the pit lane. But just as telemetry monitors the engine and the tires in real time, we have a similar tool. With the use of AI, we are able to surface the silent signals, the things that take us a very long time to hear, or that aren't surfaced because it's one voice or two voices and we don't get to that comment. AI helps us before the system fails. It extends our line of sight. It helps us to uncover the hidden risks. It helps us to perhaps predict attrition and to flag early signs of disengagement. I had a conversation earlier this week in a fireside chat with one of our clients, with Cencora, and they, a large organization, they need to operate at scale, and they are looking to make some very big, very expensive decisions, and they want to be informed by the voice of the employees, or perhaps the future employees of organizations that they're acquiring. These mid to large size organizations are really looking to find ways to listen real time and at scale. Cencora is looking to leverage AI to continually understand employee sentiment as they make decisions about mergers and acquisitions of very large companies, as they make decisions about integrating those acquired companies, which is a very long and expensive process, and to inform their employee value proposition so that they can continue to recruit and attract and retain talent. We want to have this long view, this predictive view, as we listen to the signals, because nobody wants to say, oh, we should have done something different 6 months ago. So it's time for us to shift gear. I know we've been talking about a lot of really great best practices. We had some great keynotes that help us to look into the future that are really inspiring us about what is possible in the future. And what we're hearing from the feedback is that the gear we need to shift into is real time. We want real-time data, we want more channels for listening, and we want more transparency into action. You can see a couple quotes here, and the one that I'll highlight is from the C-suite executive. If they had the opportunity, they would evolve the employee listening process by incorporating more real-time feedback tools and ensuring transparent follow-up actions. So we're looking to make this shift from static and very structured feedback solutions into more dynamic listening, where expression can be heard and signals can be identified. Now, psychological safety, I think, has been the star of the show, if not Millie. But psychological safety is our traction. The moment we lose psychological safety in our organization, we've really lost the opportunity to gather those insights from our people. It's true in schools, it's true in work. People only stretch, they only speak up, they only work to solve the real tough problems, they only lean in when they feel safe. And when that's missing, fear takes the wheel. We see innovation start to suffer, we see mistakes getting buried, we see progress suffering. There were a couple great examples this week of organizations that are directly addressing psychological safety, and I'll name just a couple. But the University of Florida has shared with us a protocol for responding to alerts such as student well-being, harassment, and threats. It's a cross effort where they've got multiple stakeholders involved, and they have a protocol for responding when these insights or alerts arise. And the University of Michigan has found a way to provide actionable summaries of student feedback by first removing any of the sensitive content before it makes its way to an instructor. So in both cases, we're protecting the well-being and the psychological safety of the people providing the feedback, as well as the psychological safety of the people who need to consume and need to take action on the feedback. All of it matters within the culture that we're supporting. So I want to give you just a moment to express and share some of what you've learned so we can spend just a little bit more time on this topic of psychological safety. I've got a couple questions here that I'll ask you to discuss at your tables, and I want to warn you that the room will get very loud. So we have a tool, and I'm going to ask for your help. So on your table are these really fun flags, okay? And I'll give you the questions here in a second. I'm only going to give you maybe 5 or so minutes, but I'll try to verbally get your attention, and it's probably not going to work. So I'll hold up the flag, And if, as you see me hold up the flag, if you'll do the same, we'll start to get everybody's attention visually while I try desperately to get your attention verbally. Okay? Everyone with me on that? We can all hold up the flag? Yeah, okay. So psychological safety, just a couple things that I want you to spend some time reflecting on. One is, what did you notice from other organizations? What are the things that they're doing, the tactics that they're doing to engender trust in their organization? I shared with you a couple examples. What is the role of the leader? We know that the leader is a pivotal role, that it has an impact on all of our other success factors. So what have you learned or what have you heard about what it is organizations and higher ed institutions are doing from a leadership perspective? And last, what are the steps that you're thinking about? As I'm sure you've got a head full of ideas of things that you want to apply, what are some of those things in the spirit of driving and designing for psychological safety? Well, this is easy. This is a group that follows directions. I like it. Thank you. It's also sort of fun to wave the flag, right? So great. That was nice. I walked around just a little bit and heard some of the conversation. A lot of commonality and themes. So hopefully you got some new ideas, or at least solidified some of the ideas that you've gained while you were here. And a lot of what I heard was really what I would categorize in the theme of uncertainty. I'm not sure who I can trust. I'm not sure how the data is going to be used. I'm not sure if I'll be found out, if there's confidentiality issues. I'm not sure if they're going to do anything about the data. And so one thing that I want to reinforce is that this doesn't happen with one go at the feedback effort. If we're thinking about running a multi-rater assessment or a 360, it's not a one-time project. In fact, it's sort of hard to instill trust, even if we have the greatest intentions and we've done everything we could to protect for confidentiality of the raters. People are still uncertain on how this data is going to be used. Will it be used for good? Will it be used for improvement? And will I be found out? The truth will be seen as you run through the whole process and then you run it again. And psychological safety is built with time and with consistency of holding to the principles of safety that we ascribe to. So I want us to think about feedback as an endurance sport. It's not a sprint. It's not a one-time project, but rather it's a process. And in order for it to be sustainable, we really need to manage our energy. We need to manage the resources that we invest and we put toward our feedback efforts. We need to look at how we want to adapt. How is it that we want to listen and accept feedback and make change? And then also, we want to be really clear about how we are going to commit to each other. All of the opportunities for feedback, it's a conversation, but it's also a commitment between two parties, multiple stakeholders that say, if I ask you for your opinion, I'm going to do something about it. It's a commitment, and there's accountability. A little bit more data from the research that we've conducted. We looked at different factors that really lead to that demonstrate rather a sustainable and capable measurement system or organization. And one of the questions that or statements that we made that we asked people to rate was, leaders clearly explain how feedback shaped their decisions. It's just one factor that leads to a successful feedback system, that leaders are clearly explaining how feedback have shaped their decisions. And then we can see a couple other factors here about employees using tools to give feedback at any point in time, that feedback is handled and shared with the right people at the right time, that each month people are getting updates. We saw that that was one of the drivers for participation, that money and resources are clearly set aside for changes. A very common experience, this was my experience for a number of years early in my career, 80%, maybe more, of the time was spent on planning for the data collection effort. So we know we need to do a survey. What questions are we going to ask? We spend a lot of time figuring out what questions to ask. We bring together committees of people to get agreement on what questions to ask. Then we need a technology so that we can do this at scale, and we can aggregate the data and we can report on it quickly. And there's RFPs, and there's a process for getting technology, all things that I know you all are familiar with. And it takes a lot of time. Then we run the survey effort, we try to drive those response rates, we send out communication, we send out reminder, we get the feedback, and then maybe we analyze the feedback, and we do a pretty good job with reporting it. There's a lot we can do with data visualization today to make it look really nice. But then it sort of stalls out there. We ran out of money, we ran out of energy, we ran out of resources, and we don't have the 80% to give to the part that is most important, and that is change. And so how do we look at how we manage our energy, how we manage commitments? So we looked here at those that said that leaders explain how feedback has shaped their decisions. They've gotten all the way through, they got the report, they're making decisions based on feedback. And those that rate this item high, they say, yes, we see that quite frequently, have a notable difference across all the other factors from those that rate this low. And we can see just quickly here the gray or the lighter color shading to the left is those that say this is low, and then the rating to the right are those that say leaders explain how feedback has shaped their decisions. And what we found is that there's a notable difference across many of these factors that lead to a sustainable feedback system. In fact, a factor of 1.7 to 2.3 times higher. Organizations where leaders are explaining how feedback has shaped their decisions have employees that are more willing, more likely to express themselves, which means more insights for us, where actions are being taken, and money and resources are more likely to be set aside at the beginning instead of looked for at the end. Said another way, when leaders are modeling the desired behaviors, it affects the entire system. So I'm going to leave you with 3 keys to listening success, and these relate to, no surprise, leadership, communication, manager, or what I'll refer to as frontline support, the people that are engaging with our employees and with our students, and resources. So regardless of where you reside, whether it's in HR or it's in learning or it's in higher education, these are the keys that help us to embed listening into our culture. And the first is related to leadership communication. We need to do a better job at equipping our leaders to consume the data, but also how to take action on the data and then further communicate about it. It's not enough just to take action, but to say it was your feedback that informed my action or my direction as a leader. That will pay out in spades as you do the next effort and you continue to seek that feedback. The next is supporting the front line, and here I have reference to managers. It comes from our Voice of Employees survey, but anybody who's interacting with those that we're seeking the feedback from. So that could be our employees, that could be our students, that could be our instructors, that could be our leaders. But supporting the front line across the board and strengthening that feedback capability. So what does it look like to ask for feedback? Feels a little awkward. We might not have all done it, perhaps ever. So we need to train people on how to do it. How do you ask for feedback in a way that's not threatening, in a way that feels safe? And then further, how do you respond to that feedback? So there's some effort that we can do there. And then last is to invest in our people infrastructure. We want to ensure that we are always thinking about the resources from end to end, not just that front end that does take a lot of time and planning and effort, but end to end so that we can ensure that we can be accountable to follow through and action. These are the 3 keys that will help to drive a culture of feedback, to drive psychological safety. So I encourage you to be a part of our research. This is a survey that is open now. I've shared with you some of the preliminary findings, but in the fall, we'll be providing a benchmarking report, and we'll be offering a webinar on this as well, so it'll be a lot meatier than what I shared with you today. You've got the English and the French version. I'll leave this up here for just a second if you want to take it. We'll also send it out afterwards. I don't know about you, but it takes me longer to capture these QR codes than I think it should. I always have trouble clicking the button. Okay. So let's take our final lap. You don't start your racing career at the Grand Prix, although some of us might want to this week. It sure looks fun, but it's not where you're going to start your racing career. Sustainable change, it's not about the fastest lap. It's about making the distance without burnout, without system failure, without team collapse, and we heard some stories of that this morning. My challenge to you is to pick your next step. What is the one thing that you plan to do when you walk out these doors and reconnect with your teams? Every one of you, regardless of position or title, you are a leader in this space. You are a driver for improving the feedback system in your organization and higher ed institution, whether formally or informally. By identifying one thing that you'll do differently, you will affect the entire system. So I want you to take those flags at your table one more time. And I'll ask you to stand up just to get some energy going in all of you out there. We'll stand up. And this flag, I know, celebrates the finish line, right? And it celebrates the end of our time together here. But I would argue this is not the finish line. This is really the starting line of your next chapter as you continue to go and improve and drive safe feedback systems within your environments. Today, we mark the start of the next lap in our race for insights. We have an ask for feedback. As you know, Anastasia's been sharing that with us throughout the conference. And so hopefully you've got that QR code and you've scanned that a number of times. We would like for you, as you engage in this next lap, to provide us with that feedback of all of your experiences throughout the conference, in the breakout sessions, the experiences in between, the keynote sessions. We are excited to read that and to bring to you an even better conference next year, if that's possible, at Explorance World 2026. So let's raise those flags. On your mark, get set, go.